Hi guys.
It's Friday, and today we're looking at comedy. We're going to really dig back in the files today and look at a comedian who was big in the 50s into the 60s, but one that was plagued with a lot of issues. I mean, he was always on the verge of being arrested, being charged for obscenity issues. I know when he was doing TV shows, they were looking at, he'd have to have everything scripted so that they could all go over that first to see what he was going to say. Police were monitoring and attending his concerts in case they had to arrest him and take him out of there. He was just shocking people so much with what he said. He did kind of political humor. He did satire. He didn't really tell jokes as such. I think I would like Rodney Dangerfield, where it's all one-liners and it's all pretty clear and pretty funny. He wasn't really a joke teller. He was more of a storyteller. He told monologues, and within that monologue, there were funny situations that came up and funny dialogue that happened. And what I'm talking about is Lenny Bruce. Now, the album I have is the real Lenny Bruce, and we'll get to this just in a second. But Lenny Bruce was kind of the forerunner, or the one that led the way for a lot of the comedians today. I know when I was looking up some research on it, they claim a couple of his disciples being Richard Pryor and George Carlin. And Rolling Stone's top comedians, the three of them, Carlin, Pryor, Lenny Bruce, were the top three comedians of all time. So certainly, maybe at a time when it wasn't as popular, a lot of you may not have heard him before. It's just because of the era. I mean, that was 70 some years ago. And at that time, he was doing material that people found offensive, people were upset with, hence the police and the charges. And now here we are in 2021, and I mean, we're offended by everything again now. So I don't know whether this is going to offend people or not, but that's always the risk with comedy. When we look at comedy albums, I've often warned people that, when these were recorded, things were a lot different. The times were different, and you can't go into it with 2021 thinking. So just a fair warning, worth checking out, but be aware there might be some things that upset you, maybe not in this. To me, this seems pretty tame, what we have now, compared to when I think of people like Richard Pryor, Eddie Murphy, even Bob Saget, man. You can see his live act, it's ridiculous. Certainly not what Lenny Bruce was doing, but what he was doing at the time was upsetting them. This album, 2-record set, out on Fantasy. A couple of photos on the front there of Lenny. And of course, Lenny expressing himself on the back photos. Not much that I can really tell you about the monologues because they stand alone, and it's not like there's the greatest hits. I can say, oh, here's one of his best monologues. He did put out a couple of albums, and I was surprised because the first album I recall being aware of as comedy albums, I mean, other than like Alan Sherman with songs, was Bill Cosby had one called Lighter Than Air. This was about the time Cosby had the TV show, and he was putting out some concert albums, and I never really heard or seen a comedy album before. But Lenny Bruce had been doing this for quite a while. He didn't do a lot of TV, only because they were concerned what they were going to get. He was one time teamed up with Buddy Hackett. Now, some of you may remember Buddy Hackett. This is another old-timey comedian. If you watch The Tonight Show when Johnny Carson was host, Buddy Hackett showed up on there quite a bit. I mean, he was working in Vegas, he was working the clubs. And he and Lenny Bruce were a team together, and they were known as the Not Ready for Primetime Players. This is in the late 50s. Flash ahead to 1975, and there's that title again, the Not Ready for Primetime Players. Only this time, it's Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, Jane Curtin, Gilda Radner, Lorraine Newman, Chevy Chase, Garrett Morris. It's the cast from Saturday Night Live have taken that same title for themselves that Lenny Bruce and Buddy Hackett had back in the late 50s. So it's kind of been recycled, but it really is kind of catchy as well. And maybe that was kind of a tip of the hat or a tribute to that kind of comedy, because certainly Saturday Night Live was breaking ground. They were, taking no prisoners. Anything was fair game. And I'm sure that was the attitude then. But I mean, in the 70s, this was all about, the young people taking over and expressing themselves. So there may have been a connection as to why they used the name as well. But certainly, if you're a student of comedy, if you enjoy stand-up comedians, if you just want to go back and find out a whole different style of comedy, or maybe where some of these other comedians got their inspiration, or where it came from, Lenny Bruce is a great place to start. Now, also, if you wanted to find a little more about him, Dustin Hoffman had a movie called Lenny, where he portrayed Lenny Bruce, and I think it's probably available as well. This was back, I'm going to say 70s, maybe 80s. Dustin Hoffman, Valerie Perrine starred in the movie Lenny. The album, there's quite a few of them on the streaming networks. You can go through and pick your choice. Again, a lot of the titles aren't going to mean much. The monologues kind of lead the way, and it's not like there's certain routines. You can say, always doing this one again. Maybe there was if you followed it a lot, but when I'm listening, everything was brand new to me. I mean, I never heard Lenny Bruce until when I bought this, and this probably would have been late 70s or so when I actually picked up the album to check him out. But certainly well worth checking out. Have another look at where comedy came from, how it developed, as well as maybe brighten up your weekend a little bit. So there's what I had for you today, a new old person to take a look at, a little historical comedy with Lenny Bruce. Hopefully everybody will take a chance, take a look at it over the weekend. Friday we're going into, it's kind of been a dull day. We're working into the fall now. Summer's ended. We're ready to start bundling up and cleaning things up, getting ready for winter. But on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, this might not be a bad way to spend the day, just to get a few laughs, or again, just to go back and research something that's come from before. Someone you may not have heard of, and maybe it's just what you've been looking for. Okay, so let's leave it at that. Lenny Bruce, comedy on Friday. Everybody have a great weekend. Hope to see you on Monday when we'll be doing jazz again. Thanks for stopping by, and we'll see you then.